let's jump right in, shall we? We're diving deep into real-world asset tokenization today. It's a mouthful, I know, but trust me, it's worth wrapping your head around. I mean, we're talking about bringing things like real estate or even fine art onto the blockchain. And get this, Standard Chartered is predicting this market could be worth an insane $30 trillion. Trillion with a T by 2030.
It's pretty mind-boggling when you think about it. It's not just about tech anymore. It's really about changing how we think about ownership and investment, like across the board.
Okay, so paint me a picture here. Where do we even begin with something this massive?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles has always been the tech side of things, actually tokenizing these real-world assets. But BNB Chain is trying to shake things up. They've launched this new no-code service.
No code. So you're telling me even I could tokenize something, like, say, my embarrassingly large collection of vintage board games, without needing to learn how to code?
Exactly. That's the whole point. BNB Chain wants to make it super simple and fast, especially for folks like you and me or small businesses. We're talking minutes to tokenize an asset, not months.
Hold up. How is that even possible?
So basically, they've created this system with pre-built smart contracts. Think of them like self-executing agreements on the blockchain, right? And they've got these user-friendly interfaces, so you don't need to code anything from scratch. You just use these templates, and boom, you've defined the ownership, transferability, all the rules for your tokenized asset.
So it's like using a website builder instead of having to code the whole thing myself. Okay, now that makes a lot more sense. And this could be huge, right? Because suddenly everyday people can get in on the action.
Absolutely. It just opens up the doors for everyone. Owning a fraction of a Picasso or investing in a sustainable energy project, it doesn't seem so crazy anymore.
This is so exciting. It's like we're talking about giving regular people access to investments that were only for the ultra-rich before.
You got it. And what's interesting? It all ties back to this whole stablecoin thing, those digital tokens pegged to the US dollar or whatever. The US Treasury is noticing something kind of wild. Stablecoin issuers are buying a ton of US Treasury bills to back their tokens,
Wait, so digital versions of US dollar are actually driving up demand for US debt? That's wild, especially with all the talk about countries ditching the US dollar.
It is, right? It's like this weird twist. Stablecoins, which are essentially tokenized dollars, are actually strengthening the dollar's global position. It makes you wonder what it means for the future of global finance. Who's really in control,
It's almost like those efforts to move away from the dollar are backfiring because of tokenization.
Yeah, exactly. It just shows you that tokenized real-world assets, they're already a big deal in global finance, even if it's all happening behind the scenes.
So we've got BNB Chain making it easy for everyone to tokenize stuff, stablecoins shaking up global finance. It feels like the whole world is catching on to the potential here.
It is. And speaking of bridging the gap between traditional finance and blockchain, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, the MAS?
Yeah, vaguely.
Well, they've been busy too. They just finished this pilot program with Swift, Chainlink, and UBS.
Oh, wow. Big names.
Right. They were testing out tokenized fund settlements between institutions. And the cool part is, these settlements could involve both blockchain and non-blockchain funds.
So even the big traditional finance players could get involved without going full-on crypto.
Precisely. It's like dipping their toes in the water. They can experience the efficiency, the transparency, all the benefits without having to dive headfirst into the crypto world.
This is all sounding incredibly promising, but I have to ask, are there any downsides we should be thinking about?
Of course, there are always things to consider, like regulations are still a bit unclear, cybersecurity threats are always out there, and the whole investor protection thing is still developing. Tokenization is still pretty new, so there are definitely risks to think about.
Right, it's important to be realistic about that. So we've got these technological advancements, global finance is shifting, even traditional institutions are getting involved. Where do we even go from here? This is getting pretty complex.
Thanks to the recent US elections and all the political back and forth around this tech, you might be surprised how much influence real-world asset tokenization is already having on the political scene. Yeah, and it feels like everyone's starting to realize how much potential it has to reshape entire industries, even global finance. It's crazy. But it's not just a finance thing anymore,
Right.
This tech is making waves in the political world too, especially here in the US.
Okay, yeah, we just had that big election. And it seems like tokenization and all things crypto were pretty hot topics.
Yeah.
What's the connection there?
Well, the election and the shift in power in the Senate, it could really impact how tokenization is regulated. Different approaches that can either kill innovation or let it flourish. You know what I mean?
So the stakes are pretty high when it comes to regulation then. What are some of the big concerns, the potential roadblocks?
One of the biggest things people are talking about is investor protection.
Yeah.
Like, how do we make sure people who are investing in these tokenized assets are actually protected from fraud, market manipulation, all that?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, tokenization opens up these investment opportunities to a lot more people, so it's got to be safe, especially for people who are new to it all.
Exactly. Another thing that worries people is money laundering,
Mhm.
or other illegal stuff. Because blockchain transactions can be kind of anonymous. There's this worry that tokenization could be used to move money around illegally.
So regulators are walking a tightrope, huh? Trying to encourage innovation, but also prevent crime.
Yeah, it's a tough balance to strike for sure. And then there's the whole question of how these tokenized assets will be taxed. This is a totally new type of asset, so the old tax laws might not even apply.
Wow, it sounds like lawmakers have their work cut out for them. It's not just about understanding the tech, it's about all these implications for investors, for taxes.
Exactly. The whole regulatory landscape is still changing. And the decisions they make in the next few years will be huge for how tokenization plays out.
Okay, so we've got the tech, the global finance shifts, the political maneuvering, but let's zoom out for a second. What does all of this mean for the average person? Like, why should they care about real-world asset tokenization?
That's the big question, right? But at its core, tokenization can really democratize investment opportunities, stuff that was totally out of reach for most people before.
Okay, so give me an example. How could this actually impact someone's life, make a difference?
Imagine you've always wanted to invest in real estate, right?
Yeah.
But you could never afford to buy a whole property. With tokenization, you could buy a piece of a building, just like you might buy a fraction of a share of a company's stock.
So instead of needing millions to buy a skyscraper, I could own a tiny sliver of it.
Exactly. And that opens up so many possibilities. You could diversify your investments with assets that were impossible to get before. Things like rare collectibles, sustainable energy projects, even intellectual property rights.
It's like Kickstarter for assets.
Yeah.
But with all the security and transparency of blockchain, I love it.
And it's not just for individual investors either. Tokenization could totally revolutionize fundraising for startups and small businesses.
How so?
Think about it. Entrepreneurs could easily issue tokenized securities, raise capital from investors all over the world, without having to go through those traditional venture capitalists or banks.
That could be a game changer for so many entrepreneurs, the ones who usually get shut out by those traditional funding sources.
Exactly. And it's not just about getting the money. Tokenization could also make it way easier to buy and sell illiquid assets, things like real estate or art,
So streamline transactions, lower costs, make markets that were always slow and clunky more efficient.
Yep, the potential benefits are huge. But like with any disruptive tech, we got to be aware of the downsides too.
Right. Okay, let's talk about those risks. What are some things we need to be careful about?
Well, the regulatory uncertainty is a big one, like we talked about. The rules are still being written, and that can create instability, scare off investors. Cybersecurity is another big concern, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about tokenizing really valuable assets, security breaches could be disastrous.
For sure. And then there's the whole question of whether these tokenization platforms are reliable. Are they transparent? Can we trust them?
So a lot of it comes down to trust, huh? Do we trust the tech, the platforms, the regulations?
You nailed it. Trust is key here. We need to be careful, make sure there are safeguards in place to protect investors, and to make sure the whole system works.
So we've got all this excitement, the potential, the risks. It feels like we're on the verge of something huge. What happens next? What's the next chapter in this story?
Well, in the last part of our deep dive, we're going to get even more specific. We'll look at how tokenization could change particular industries, real-world examples of how this tech is already disrupting things in areas like supply chain management and intellectual property.
Okay, that sounds like a great way to wrap up this exploration. Welcome back, everyone. We're in the home stretch now of our deep dive into real-world asset tokenization. We've covered a ton of ground, the tech, the financial side, the politics, even the risks. But now I'm ready to see how this all plays out in the real world. See some actual examples.
Yeah, it's one thing to talk about the potential, but seeing it in action really brings it all home. So let's get into some specifics, some industries where tokenization is already making a difference.
Okay, perfect. Where do we start?
How about supply chain management? Those global supply chains are so complex, right? So many middlemen, tons of paperwork, always the risk of fraud, delays, stuff getting lost.
Ugh, don't even get me started. Ever try tracking a package that's like stuck on a boat somewhere in the middle of the ocean. It's a nightmare.
I feel you, it's the worst. But imagine a world where every single product, from the raw materials to the finished stuff,
Yeah.
is represented by a unique token on a blockchain.
Hold on. So, like, I could track a bag of coffee beans from the farm in Colombia all the way to my cup here in New York.
Exactly. Every step of the way, that token gets updated. So everyone has total visibility. Suppliers, manufacturers, distributors, retailers, even us, the consumers.
That would be huge for industries where you need to know exactly where something came from, like food, medicine, luxury goods, all that.
Absolutely. We're talking about getting rid of fake products, reducing waste, making sure everything is ethically sourced and handled properly.
So it's not just about tracking, then what else can these tokens do?
Well, remember those smart contracts we talked about? You can build those right into the tokens. So you can automate all kinds of processes in the supply chain. Like payments could be triggered when a shipment reaches a certain point, or insurance claims could be filed automatically if something gets damaged.
Wow. So more efficiency, lower costs, less room for human error or arguments.
Exactly, and we're just scratching the surface here. The possibilities with tokenization in supply chains are pretty much endless.
Okay, you've officially blown my mind. What other industry is ripe for a tokenization takeover?
How about intellectual property? Managing and protecting intellectual property in the digital age is a nightmare. It's expensive, it takes forever, and the laws are all over the place.
Yeah, I can see that. With the internet, it's so easy to copy and share stuff. How do you even keep track of who's using what and make sure creators are getting paid fairly?
That's exactly the problem tokenization is trying to solve. What if we could create a unique token on a blockchain for every patent, every copyright, every trademark?
So like if someone uses my amazing song lyrics or copies my groundbreaking invention, the token would track it and I'd get paid automatically.
You got it. It's like a built-in royalty system. Totally transparent, can't be messed with. Creators would have way more control over their work, and they could easily make money from it without having to chase people down.
That could unleash a ton of creativity if people know their ideas are protected.
Absolutely. And it's not just about individuals either. Businesses could use this too to collaborate on projects, license their stuff securely.
This is amazing. We've talked about supply chains, intellectual property. It seems like there's no limit to what this tech can do.
You're right. We've just scratched the surface. Tokenization could change healthcare, energy, real estate, everything. We're at the beginning of a real revolution here.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is that this isn't just about tech or finance. It's about creating new systems, empowering people, building a future that's more efficient, transparent, fair. It's a story that's still being written, and we all get to decide what role we want to play.
It's been an incredible journey exploring this with you. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into real-world asset tokenization. Stay curious, keep learning, and let's see what the future holds.